tam 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 takajanu takita sa nidapadi takita dhin dhin dhin. Tam 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 takajanu takita sa nidapadi takita dhin dhin dhin. Takajanu tatam takajanu takita tam takajanu takita tam 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 takajanu takita sa nidapadi takita dhin dhin dhin. Takajanu tatam takajanu takita tam takajanu takita tam 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 takajanu takita sa nidapadi.
In India, there was a type of caste system. At the top of this caste system was the Brahmins, or the priests. Below them was the Kshatriyas, who were the nobles or warriors. And below them, there was the merchants, who were called the Vaishya. And below the merchants, there was the Sudra, the peasants and commoners. There was another group that was outside of this caste system called the Untouchables. The Brahmin caste were the priests of the Indian country. They were concerned primarily with learning and the spirituality of people. They mostly taught the Kshatriyas and the other wealthy people in India. Below the Brahmins were the Kshatriyas. They were the nobles/warriors of the Indian caste system. They were charged with the protection and fighting of their areas during wartime. They also governed during peacetime. The kings often belonged to this class, requiring fighting and weapons experience for ruling.
The Vaishyas were the current merchants and landowners of the Indian culture. The traditional jobs were actually raising cattle and agriculture, but over time they became to be known as moneylenders, traders, and landowners. The Indian traders of the Vaishya group were credited with spreading the Indian culture throughout Southeast Asia.
Sudras were commoners, peasants, servants, fourth lowest class. Their most common jobs would consist of artisans and laborers. There are different spectrums of the groups, where on the lowest end of that varna are the untouchables. These variations are based upon the preoccupations of that group that could be considered unclean or clean. It is made to believe that Kshatriya and Vaishya derive from Sudras. The history of the castes. The history of the caste is incorporated through the Hindu religion, which has its own theological explanation to how the Indian culture should be stratified. According to the ancient texts of Rig Veda, Brahma, the four-headed and armed deity, is worshipped as the creator of the universe, thereby creating everybody living on earth. Since Brahma was the creator, the caste was organized based on the deity's limbs and other body parts to symbolize Hindu organization. The mouth of the deity represents the highest class, which are the priests and teachers. One class lower are the warriors from his arms, then merchant and traders from his thighs, finally workers and peasants from his feet. The actual term casta came from a Portuguese language. It translates into race. It was derived from when they first encountered the Indian stratification system. The actual word for it in the Indian culture is jati. The caste system in India had similar functions to the one in the Roman Empire, where there were three different layers, and each one of them played a function in the society, such as judiciary, military, commerce, etc. But eventually, this system was further stratified as the British have administered their affairs and used the caste as a way of controlling people and keeping the social order.
The top of the Korean hierarchy were the Yangbin class, literally meaning two classes. It was composed of the Mumbai, who were the scholars, and the Mumban, who were warriors. Within this class, the Mumbai scholars enjoyed a much higher social stature over the Mumban warrior class. Below them were the Jung-in, literally meaning middle class, and they were beneath the Mumban warriors. They were technicians specializing in medicine, accounting, translator, and rural bureaucrats. Below the Jung Inn were the Sengmen, who were commoners. They were made of farmers that actually owned their own fields. They were a very large population, but by far the largest population were the Nobi. They were the serfs, or the untouchables. They ranged from anywhere from a third to half of the entire population throughout the course of the Korean caste system, and they were people who did not own their own land and often worked fields or were beggars.
At the top was the samurai warrior class, which was headed by the shogun. They made up about 10% of the population. Samurai answered to their daimyo lords, which only answered to the shogun. Farmers and peasants are higher on the social totem pole than the merchants and artisans because productive members are held to a higher standard. Artisans were next. They created beautiful goods like swords, but were still held at a lower level than farmers. Merchants and shopkeepers were considered the parasites of feudal Japan that only made a profit off of everyone else. Slaves and prostitutes were ranked outside the tiered hierarchy. Prostitutes and courtesans were ranked among themselves.
Royalty, the highest of the social classes in the Middle Ages. The royalty included kings, queens, princes, and princesses. Royals had complete power over the land and political and economic decisions during the Middle Ages. Kings. They were the highest authority in the land. They had to make laws and attempt to remove poverty from their lands and take care of the citizens in his kingdom. Princes. Depending on their birth order, a prince may have been next in line for the throne when his father died. Their counterpart, the princess, was often married off for political alliances. Nobility. After the royals, nobility had the power of the social classes. It included hereditary nobility, which were those whose power was bestowed on them through blood relations, and non-hereditary nobility, which included those who rose to power through non-familial means. Hereditary were dukes and barons, and non-hereditary were knights.
Peasants. They were the lowest social rank, included freemen who had some rights and land. There were serfs who had no rights and slaves who were bought and sold. Freemen were poor farmers who owned small portions of land. Serfs were indentured servants who worked for nobles on their land as payment and housing. Slaves were mainly illegal throughout the Middle Ages, but it was still a common practice in Europe. Then there were the clergy, who were ranked outside the social classes as their own hierarchy. They were an influential part of the time period. The Pope, obviously, was the highest power in the church and had a heavy influence over economic and political decisions, but over time lost political power. Bishops, ranked right after the Pope, were considered to be nobility. Priests gave masses and were responsible for collecting church taxes and giving alms to the poor, often the only literate people in the village, so they kept church records. Monks were the lowest rank in the church, devoted their lives to learning, could read and write in Latin. Some of the first Bibles were scribed by monks.